out with your friends, you're talking and having conversation, and you got your phone out. They said they could actually turn your phone on and listen to you. You wouldn't even know the phone was on. Okay? They said the only way that you could get around it was taking the battery out. So then what did they start doing? They started making the phones where you couldn't take the battery out. Okay? This is all a game. This is why the phone and all that stuff is called digital heroin now. Because everybody's like addicts. We're addicted to it. Think about it. You go into when we go in to make prayer and people's phones are going on. You know? Or people are sitting in the mansion and texting and doing all of that stuff. Okay? Because it's an addiction. It's a powerful addiction. Okay? But now, I want you to check this out. Because I found this next piece kind of interesting. Alright? Because it goes to talking about children. Alright?
One of the sad things that having been in law enforcement, this is my 24th year now, is that it seems that when I've taken people to jail, and I know the people that are in jail, just about every one of them have a literacy issue, literacy problem. No one ever took the time to teach them how to read, to comprehend, to communicate, and I think that as a result of their failure to, or our failure as a community, as a society, as a nation, to educate these folks, I like to say we can either educate or incarcerate, and I believe that we'd be a lot better off educating people. It's one of my passions in life. The illiteracy rate in prison is astounding to me. It's almost now we're looking at a predictive model in terms of predicting in the 3rd grade who's going to end up in prison based on their ability or inability to read. Reading.
So they build prisons based on 3rd and 4th grade reading scores. They build prisons based on 3rd and 4th grade reading scores. Because they know if they can't read and so then
it's a planned agenda.
Right, it's a planned agenda.
They're more easily swayed.
Exactly.
They can't read, so.
And that's why it's so important. But the thing is now, think about it. A lot of our kids, they don't even want to really try to read now. Because they're used to all this technology.
And they don't have
Right.
And they don't learn the cues. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, bro.
They don't learn the cues. Like I saw a YouTube video. It's entitled "Don't Talk to Police." So, in brief, I had to pick up a friend in Jersey the other day, Philadelphia, drop him off, pick up his car. On the way back, he told me, you're going the wrong way, So we pulled over by this little mall, and he was saying, you're going the wrong direction. You follow, you're going the same way I'm going. I said, well, my GPS told me this. He said, okay, well, you got to turn around. Before we get back in the car, cop car pulls up, and white police officer comes up to my window and says, how you doing? So, where you going? I said, I'm going this way. She says, but where you coming from? I said, I'm going this way. She starts ranting in that way, and I never answered her second question. None of your business where I'm coming from. I'm a grown man. I'm going in this direction. You follow me? So back to the illiteracy, if they can't read, they can't comprehend, they won't even know how to do research to get basic information. You follow what I'm saying? So.
Right. And see, the thing is, with them being so caught up in this technology, it's like they've grown up on it. So they're used to things coming at them like this, rapidly. So when they try to sit there and read, it's like boring to them. Okay? So a lot of it is, it's a big setup. See, the thing is that they want to dumb down the public anyway. That's why on your phones, they had the thing where you go to start typing a word and the word pop up.
Oh yeah,
so
correct
then
it
that's
for
not
you.
giving you practicing spelling and
That's right. No, they
right?
correct it. They spell it correctly.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. But that's not giving you,
Exactly.
because you're typing the word in, I mean, I can see it corrected afterwards, but the word pops right up. And this technology is dumbing people down.
So it's like an electronic crutch.
Right. The whole thing is there. You got your calculator, you got everything.
Yeah.
So, but what happens if you don't have it?
And what about the children learning when they go home and Google their homework? I mean, they Google what they need to know.
Right.
Like, how are they learning?
They really not. Right, they're not. And that's the sad thing, because you could be taking a test and you don't got that stuff with you, what you gonna do? What you gonna do? It makes you dependent upon it. Okay?
And books give kids the opportunity to learn how to express themselves, to educate themselves, gives them the tools to be able to compete. And sadly, in this country, every 26 seconds or so, a kid is dropping out of high school. And we know that when you fail to graduate from high school, and you drop out, that you're 7 to 8 times more likely to end up in prison. One of the sad things.
Now, there's been a lot of talk about this guy. His name was Juice WRLD. All right, he's a rapper. I don't know if you're familiar with him. No, okay.
Never heard of them.
I don't watch TV.
All right, but check it out, because it's very interesting, because he died from drug use. Okay.
We've been talking about this opioid crisis from West Virginia to DC to the rap world to our neighbors' homes and sometimes even in our own homes. And Juice WRLD was open about his struggles. In fact, he had tweeted that he'd stopped abusing codeine for his girlfriend, saying, "Learn this, everyone. Addiction kills. All but you can overcome." If what his girlfriends are saying is true, he was still dealing and struggling with this addiction. And so we called in Dr. Lippy Roy, who specializes in addiction. She's here with us now. Listen, whether you listen to his music or not, it's another senseless death likely tied to this opioid addiction. Juice WRLD's friend said that 3 Percocet, lean, at one point in time in his body, what does that do to someone?
And the thing is, if you don't know who these people are, you need to find out, especially if you have kids or grandkids or kids that you care for, because these people are highly influential to your children.
Which people?
These rappers.
Juice WRLD.
Okay.
They are highly influential to the children, okay? But the thing is, what are the main things that they're talking about in their music? Sex, drugs, violence. That's the main thing you hear when you listen to some of these, well, the majority of these rap songs, because that's what these record labels want. They want them to have that be the focus of their songs, all right?
Yeah, thank you so much for talking about this really important public health problem and epidemic, opioids specifically, but addiction more broadly. Most of my patients and most people who are using opioids are actually using multiple substances. We have to wait for the official toxicology report, but yeah, opioids such as Percocet, which is a combination of oxycodone, which is an opioid, and acetaminophen, which is commercially known as Tylenol, along with lean, which is a cough syrup, along with codeine and other substances, can cause a whole host of problems, including shutting down your breathing.
According to people on the plane, he started to seize. He started to have seizures. And it made me think of the rapper Rick Ross, who was on our show not long ago. I'm going to play what Rick said to me in an interview where he revealed he also dealt with an addiction that he has since conquered. Let's listen to it.
At one time, I was drinking Testanex and codeine at one time.
What is Testanex?
Testanex was something that really helped me. I felt relaxed at the time. It was something I would sit in the studio and drink for hours at a time. After 3 or 4 years, I wouldn't get no sleep, and so that's what began me having seizures.
So
I began suffering seizures.
He started having seizures, ended up nearly losing his life. Juice WRLD had a seizure, may have gone into cardiac arrest after that. Is that what this does when you have all of this in your body?
So opioids cause a whole host of problems. Opioid intoxication can really shut things down, slow your heart rate, your blood pressure, but how it really kills people is shuts down your breathing. That's how people die of overdose. But it's actually the acetaminophen, the Tylenol, when that's taken in high doses, can cause convulsions and seizures. Again, he might have also been taking other substances, which altogether could have caused a whole.
Why didn't the Narcan work?
That's a great question. So Narcan, also known as naloxone, is a really effective antidote at reversing opioid-induced overdose. The problem here is that it maybe didn't work for a number of reasons. Maybe he took a high dose of opioids and they just didn't give him enough Narcan. It's possible that if he was taking fentanyl, that's a really potent opioid, that wasn't effective. But if he was using other substances, remember, Narcan will only reverse opioids. It won't reverse benzos, alcohol, or any other substance.
So whatever else is in your body, it does not have an impact on it. I was listening.
So if our children are emulating these people, what do you think they're going to get caught up in? They're going to get caught up in the same stuff. Okay, Meek Mills, he has a song called F something, and he's talking about he takes Percocets and his girlfriend takes Molly's and all of this stuff. But the school district of Philadelphia brought him into our school as if he was a role model for these kids because he was giving them book bags. Okay, and he said, "Oh, for all y'all that support my music, continue to support my music." What are you talking about? You're talking about stuff that's destroying these kids and destroying the community. But yet the school district brought him in as a role model. So here I am telling the kids, "Oh yeah, you can't get on this music and stuff," but then you come in and bring them in as a role model. Okay, so we're sending mixed messages to these children.
Interview, and if what the ex-girlfriend was saying was true, I thought, how was he even able to walk and function with that amount of drugs and different types in his body?
Yeah, that's a great question. What I've learned from taking care of patients who've been struggling with addiction for years is that the body is this remarkable machine. We put it through so much and it can really adapt, but at a certain point, addiction is a chronic medical disease and these people need care.
And I know that some of these medicines are prescribed, which is what we're talking about, and we've seen companies now fined and some even going to jail. But this leads to the heroin crisis as well, because once you can't get it in a prescription form, people then go to heroin for that same relief, if that's the word. I don't even know how to describe it.
Yeah, no, but you're absolutely right. In fact, the current opioid crisis is different today than it was when it started in the late 90s. It was mostly prescription opioids like OxyContin, and then it went, the second wave was heroin, and then the third wave, which is what we're kind of still dealing with now, is fentanyl, and which is back in the 2000s, only 3% of overdose deaths were associated with fentanyl. Now it's over 50%. So
if they can't afford that drug, they have to get something cheap and turn to heroin. Turn to heroin. And we've seen Kensington Avenue, right? So this is a big game, y'all. They're dumbing down the public and they're drugging them up. Got people out here looking like zombies. Because if you don't have citizens that can think, all right, and are active, I just continue to do whatever I'm doing.
It's the same thing that they now got the clinics that they can go and shoot
Exactly.
up. So now
Right.
Safe
injection site. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
They're gonna get it illegally or legally, but they can go to these sites and shoot up.
Right. But then you have a nation of zombies.
And
Nation
they
of zombies.
literally look like zombies.
They look like
do.
zombies.
I saw one man walking on Broad Street, almost in the street. He take one step and 5 steps back. One step, 5 steps. It was
Somebody hit the rewind button.
Yes. And
He
he
said the
looked
rewind.
like the Walking Dead.
But that's what it is. It's the Walking Dead. There was a story God told me one time. He said that there used to be an ordinance that you couldn't build a building higher than what?
William Penn's hat.
William Penn, right?
Yeah.
I know what?
Higher than
William
Penn.
Penn's hat.
Penn.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because he was a Mason and he was watching over the living dead.
That's deep.
Okay, they considered them dead because they didn't have the knowledge that they had. Okay, so and it was funny because when I was at an appointment one time and 2 people were talking and they were talking about Masonic stuff and I mentioned that and the guy was like, "Where's your ring?" Ring? I was like, I don't have a ring. I just do studying.
You show them the Quran.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's it right there.
Yeah.
But now I want you to hear this because this one is very important. Because this is a guy from the business. All right? He's from the music industry. This guy's Crazy Bone from Bone Thugs and Harmony.
Oh.
All right? But I want you to hear what he says, because this is very interesting.
Let the truth talk to us, let the truth talk to us, let the truth talk to us,
When you talk about the prison industrial complex, all right?
let the truth talk to us, let the truth talk to us, let the truth talk to us,
Issue at hand. I just want to say to all my fellow hip-hop artists and hip-hop fans that we have been had again.
Damn.
We've been bamboozled.
Hoodwinked.
Let us stay, I tell you.
All the Malcolm X words.
Once again, you know what I'm saying? Now, a few of y'all might have already heard about this, about how the music industry has very close ties with the private prison system.
Yeah.
And the reason being is because the music business has invested millions of dollars in the private prison system.
Now, makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
Because you look at the activities and stuff that they push, it's things that get people locked up. All right? Makes a lot of
They're
sense.
getting paid on the back end.
Here we go.
And the front end.
Now watch it. Watch
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, you heard it correctly. Again, the music business and the entertainment business in general, meaning people who control the media, the music industry, and also
Publication.
private prisons.
Yeah, magazines, all that.
Somebody sent me an article, like, I think it was like 6 or 7 years ago.
Right.
And I read this article, bro, and I was like absolutely shocked, very shocked.
Talk to us.
In fact, I want to read this letter. This article, but it's actually a letter that was written by somebody that was a decision maker at a major label.
Shot call.
And he said, you know, he was invited to a very special meeting about the future of hip hop back in 1991.
Okay.
So here's what he said. This is how the events went down at the meeting.
Break it down, man.
Okay, I just ride with me, okay, because I'm reading this, oh, this is real, hold on, wait, let me try to,
Way out article too, man. You know what I'm saying? When he told me on telephone about this, wait till y'all hear this, G. You know what I'm saying? It's mesmerizing how these people do, you know what I'm saying, the plans that they got for the downfall, how far they will go, you know what I'm saying, to make people, you know, actually slip in society. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, so it says, and the title of the letter is, The Secret Meeting That Changed Rap Music and Destroyed a Generation.
Damn.
So it says, hello. After more than 20 years, I finally decided to tell the world what I witnessed in 1991, which I believe was one of the biggest turning points in popular music, and ultimately, American society. I have struggled for a long time weighing the pros and cons of making my story public, as I was reluctant to implicate the individuals who were present that day. So I've simply decided to leave out the names and all the details that may risk my personal well-being and that of those who were, like me, dragged into something they weren't ready for.
Damn.
Hold on, let me,
So we gonna tell the story.
we gonna tell the story. We ain't scared.
You know what I'm saying? What they gonna do?
They after us, not scared.
Look, that black van.
So look, so he says, between the late 80s and early 90s, I was what you may call a decision maker with one of the more established companies in the music industry. I came to Europe in the early 80s and quickly established myself in the business. The industry was different back then, since technology and media weren't accessible to people like that, like they are today. The industry had more control over the public and had the means to influence them any way it wanted.
Right.
This may explain why in early 1991, I was invited to attend a closed-door meeting with a small group of business insiders to discuss rap music's new direction. Rap music's new direction.
Yeah.
Little did I know we would be asked to participate in one of the most unethical and destructive business practices ever seen.
Crazy.
So this was the meeting. The meeting was held at a private residence on the outskirts of Los Angeles. I remember about 25 to 30 people were were being there.
Right.
Most of them familiar faces. Speaking of those I knew, we joked about the theme of the meeting, as many of us did not care for rap and failed to see the purpose of being invited to a private meeting to discuss the future of hip-hop.
Talk to him.
Among the attendees was a small group of unfamiliar faces who stayed to themselves and made no attempt to socialize beyond their circle. Based on their behavior and formal appearances, they didn't seem to be from our industry. Our casual chatter was interrupted when we were asked to sign a confidentiality agreement preventing us from publicly discussing the information presented during the meeting. Needless to say, this intrigued, in some cases, disturbed many of us. The agreement was only a page long, but very clear on matters and consequences, which stated that violating the terms would result in job termination immediately. We asked several people what this meeting was about and the reason for such secrecy, but could not find anyone who had the answers for us. A few people refused to sign and walked out. Nobody stopped them. I was tempted to follow, but curiosity got the best of me.
That's right.
A man who was part of the unfamiliar group collected all the agreements from us. So now, it's going to get to the good part because the meeting about to start.
Talk to him, G.
It says, quickly after the meeting began, hold on a second.
Get your popcorn, y'all.
Popcorn, get your pistol, no sweat.
Real now.
Quickly after this meeting began, one of the industry colleagues, who shall remain nameless like everybody else, thanked us for attending. He then gave the floor to a man who only introduced himself by first name and gave no other details about his personal background. I think he was the owner of the residence, but that was never confirmed. He briefly praised all of us for the success we had achieved in our industries and congratulated us for being selected as part of this small group of decision makers. At this point, I began to feel slightly uncomfortable in the strangeness of this gathering. The subject quickly changed as the speaker went on to tell us that the respective companies we represented had invested in a very profitable industry which could become even more rewarding with our active involvement. He explained that the companies we worked for had invested millions into the building of privately owned prisons, and that our positions of influence in the music industry would actually impact the profitability of these investments. Then he says, I remember many of us in the group immediately looking at each other in awe and confusion. At the same time, I didn't know what a private prison was, but I wasn't the only one. Sure enough, someone asked what these prisons were and what any of this had to do with music. We were told that these prisons were built by privately owned companies who received funding from the government based on the number of inmates. The more inmates, the more the government would pay these prisons. It was also made clear to us that since these prisons are privately owned, as they become publicly traded, we'd be able to buy shares. Most of us were taken back by this. Again, a couple of people asked what this had to do with us. At this point, my industry colleague who had first opened the meeting took the floor again and answered our questions. He told us that since our employees had become silent investors in this prison business, it was now in their interest to make sure that these prisons remained filled. Our job would be to help make this happen by making music which promote criminal behavior, rap being the music of choice. He assured us that this would be a great situation for us because rap music was becoming an increasingly profitable market for our companies, and as employees, we'd also be able to buy stocks in these prisons. Immediately, silence came over the room. You could have heard a pin drop. I remember looking around to make sure I wasn't dreaming and saw half of the people with dropped jaws. My daze was interrupted when someone shouted, "Is this a fucking joke?" At this point, things became chaotic.
Right.
Two of the men who were part of the unfamiliar group grabbed the man who shouted and attempted to remove him from the house. A few of us, myself included, tried to intervene. One of them pulled out a gun, and we all backed off. They separated us from the crowd, and all four of us was escorted outside. My industry colleague, who opened up the meeting earlier, hurried out to meet us and reminded us that we had signed an agreement and would suffer the consequences of speaking out about this publicly, or even those who attended the meeting.
Okay.
I asked him, why was he involved with something so corrupt? And he replied, it's bigger than the music business and nothing we can do. And, no, it's bigger than the music business and nothing we want to challenge without risking consequences. We all protested as we walked back into the house. I remember word for word the last thing he said. It's out of my hands now. Just remember you signed an agreement. He then closed the door behind him. The men rushed us to our car and actually waited until we drove off the property.
Damn.
So this meeting, bro.
So think about it. They push criminal behavior through the music so that they can fill these jails. And it only makes sense. I saw a documentary about the rap industry. And there was they were talking to some of the young rappers. They said, why don't y'all rap about positive stuff? He said, record labels don't want that. He said, when we come in there talking that positive stuff, they said, no, we don't want that. But it all makes sense. Because like I said, everything is like pieces to a puzzle. And you start putting the pieces together, you see what's really going on. All right? Interesting.
Wow.
Lie for me, right?
But now we're going to go back to where we left off, all right? Last time when we were talking about vaccines, all right? But I want you to see the game that's played here through television program, all right? This is from the show House. I don't know if y'all remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember House.
The Dr. House. But check him out.
No formula, just mommy's healthy, natural breast milk.
Yummy.
Her whole face just got swollen like this overnight.
No fever. Gland's normal. Missing her vaccination dates.
We're not vaccinating. Gribbit.
Think they don't work?
I think some multinational pharmaceutical company wants me to think they work. Pad their bottom line.
May I?
Sure.
Gribbit. All natural, no dyes is a good business. All natural children's toys. Toy companies, they don't arbitrarily mark up their frogs. They don't lie about how much they spend on research and development. The worst that a toy company could be accused of is making a really boring frog. Gribbit. You know another really good business? Teeny tiny baby coffins. You can get them in frog green, fire engine red. Really. The antibodies in Yummy Mummy only protect the kid for 6 months, which is why these companies think they can gouge you. They think that you'll spend whatever they ask to keep your kid alive. Want to change things? Prove them wrong. A few hundred parents like you decide they'd rather let their kid die than cough up $40 for a vaccination. Believe me, prices will drop really fast. Gribbit.
Tell me what she has.
A cold.
So the game is that they use these television shows to make people who are against vaccinations like they're idiots. That, or they're gonna have their kid die and all of this stuff.